Salut everyone! In this video we are going to talk about the famous meme around Arch Linux. You heard it already, and if you don't, it's called I use Arch. By the way, let's get into it. As always, let's start with a little bit of context. Last week I had the chance to be invited to a podcast with some of my buddies. And what happened during the show is like we did realize we were 3 Arch Linux users in the podcast, and actually one of them is part of the team, like the official team of Arch Linux, and it kind of like triggered some viewer, and some of the feedback I read was pretty interesting. Some of it is totally founded, and some of them are like totally all over the place, guys. So I had this idea to make this little video because not only this feedback was related to the podcast we recorded like last week, but also like since I started this channel, I had so many comments regarding Arch and regarding the elitist approach of the Arch user and all this like nonsense. Like, to be clear, I'm going to be straight into it. All this nonsense. And I'm saying all this nonsense because I did switch to Arch. To be super fair, I'm not an Arch user by definition. If you define what is an Arch user, it would be someone who has been using Arch most of his life. And I don't. I would be more like a Debian user and not an Arch user, even if I switch my desktop from Windows to Arch almost like 3 years ago now. Before, I was using Windows, but I was using Debian for a long time, actually, like almost since they released it on the server world. Like, I'm a big fan of Debian. I've always been like in and out on this distro, and it's a distro I have in my heart, right? But using it as a desktop operating system with my hardware is just impossible. Or it will be possible, but it will be a real headache on a daily basis. So I use Arch. Simple as that. And the funny thing about it is that I discovered the meme while, like making my research when I was troubleshooting my Arch. Because truth is, when you install Arch for the first time, well, you're gonna have a lot of configuration to do for it to work properly. It's literally what the distro is all about. So let's talk about the meme. So my first research landed on Quora, and the question was simple, was like, what is meant by the way I use Arch? And this, you will see it's pretty interesting. The first answer is related to, I'm gonna read it. The phrase, by the way I use Arch, typically means that the speaker is informing someone, by the way, or BTW, that they use Arch Linux, a popular, highly customizable Linux distribution. Arch Linux is known for its simplicity, flexibility, and the rolling release model, or as they say, the KISS model. Keep it simple, stupid. Which means that users receive continuous update instead of periodic major release. This statement can often imply that the speaker values control over their operating system and is comfortable with a more hands-on approach to system management compared to a more beginner-friendly distribution. And to be fair, it seemed like a pretty objective, definition. But then when you go, when you start to go deeper there, oh my gosh. So I won't go through all of them because it's going to be otherwise a long video. But some people created some meme portraying Arch Linux user as nerd and telling everyone that they use Arch Linux. Arch Linux users don't care about meme. They have packages to be updated and dependencies are broken. So you see the shot fired? Like, this is so polarizing, it's just insane. So I started to dig a little bit deeper. And I found this article about the meme itself. So all I'm going to say might not really be true, okay? Like, I do believe like this all, like polarization about the meme itself is not that important, except for the people who have like an Arch literally, like, by the way, living for free, rent-free in their head. I will talk about that later, but this is another subject. So let's continue to try to understand historical part of it. So here we have the definition. And apparently, the meme about Arch Linux have appeared online as early as 2011 and are likely inspired by troubleshooting posts by Arch users trying to maintain the OS. The meme became increasingly popular on Linux-based subreddit around 2018. So let's try to understand what really happened in between. So if you look at the historic, Arch Linux is a Linux distribution, was published in 2002. The idea behind Arch Linux is what I was mentioning earlier, is KISS, keep it simple, stupid. I like to say the other way though, like keep it stupid, simple. I like this one better, but they choose like simple, stupid, but why not? Meaning it was a very simple, customizable interface. It's not considered very user-friendly and requires dedication to learn, but at a large community of users. So which is fairly the truth there. Like it's hard to say the opposite. Even if now with Arch install, like everybody can install Arch Linux really easily, but I'm guessing the early like hardcore user of Arch Linux didn't have access to this script and they had to do everything by hand, which is not really easy for a beginner. If you read the manual, it's not hard at all, but if you don't, it's problematic. When you look at the first meme they share here, is this shirtless guy, which is not tan at all, trying to seduce, I guess, this girl, saying like, hey there, did you know that I use Arch Linux? Like, I think it kind of like show like where we are at, right? The way I see it from an Arch Linux user, it's kind of like a self-depreciating type of humor. Again, we don't really know about the story yet, but when I saw those actual like meme, I thought it was really fun because it's kind of like showing you the, duality of the Arch Linux user. Like, on one hand, you really want to prove to yourself like you can do it, and you have the quality to do it. But on the other hand, you want everybody else to know it. It's really like a self-deprecating type of sense of humor. I'm a big fan of that because, again, this is not that serious. At the end of the day, you use Arch or you use Debian or you use Fedora or whatever. Like, who cares? Nobody cares, right? But I think it's a nice way, to put your feet on the ground, saying like, hey, I use Arch by the way, but like, nobody cares, but I still have to say it. I think it's kind of fun, right? I believe this is a type of humor like this kind of meme really vehiculate. If you go further, you're gonna find this meme here, which is SpongeBob, which doesn't look in a great shape, but writing in like elite mode, by the way, I use Arch. And this one comes from the forum on Reddit of the Linux master race. And it kind of show like how those type of sense of humor does impact the non-Arch user. As you can see here, it's written when an Arch user comments. So it's really funny how from one hand to another end of the spectrum, you have like totally different approach. But anyways, we'll talk about that later. If you look at the evolution of the popularity of the meme, you see that in 2018, someone called the Programmers89 posted a floating boy chasing a running boy using the phrase, by the way, I use Arch, and you see the Ubuntu user here. So again, I think it's fun because it's kind of showing like the other users, they don't care and they just try to escape the meme itself, the annoyance of it. But should they really be annoyed? I don't know. I don't think it's really annoying. Like if someone would come and say like, hey, I use Debian, by the way, like it wouldn't really hurt my self, like sensibility. Like I wouldn't care. But apparently like some users are just tired of listening to it or are just tired of this. I don't know. But I think it was pretty funny. And later we had a user, a Redditor called Susu Kakansoya, which written a possible explanation of the meme origin. So you know me, I actually found the post on Reddit, and you have here the explanation of this user. In the Linux master race Arch meme debacle a week or two back, so this post is 6 years old, there was a familiar discussion about this. Someone gave the following narrative, that when Arch was new, it was distrusted by the rest of the community because of some stability issue, etc., etc. However, as it got more and more usable, Arch users began telling everyone else that they were using Arch to bring more awareness about Arch and prove that it is usable. They were using it just fine after all, which kind of makes sense, right? Because sometimes you have like those way of thinking which are like really deep inside the user mind, and I believe that some of those Arch users at the time wanted to change the overall like thinking there and prove to the world that their distro was actually stable. And when I mean stable, I'm not talking about the rolling release cycle. I'm talking about the fact that it doesn't break every update. With this strategy released onto the wild, rolling across the community, Arch usage share quickly went from laughable to that of a major distribution. And to be fair, Arch nowadays doesn't break every update. Like, it does not. I've been using mine for like maybe 3 years now, different, Arch-based distro, and now like pure Arch or whatever. But it doesn't break. It doesn't break that easily. I would say like it breaks when you break it, obviously. But this is another subject too. But it doesn't break that easily. Of course, with the end goal completed, the meme is supposed to be obsolete, but it stuck its original purpose lost to time. And I think this take here is really important, because the meme itself didn't change, but the evolution of his understanding totally changed. Because me, I'm still memeing about it, but again, it's more like self-deprecating, but it's still here. And the funny part is like some users also use it differently. So if you look at the other approach, you can see like right away like 3 or 4 comments into the question, which was like, what does it mean? You have this user here, which is saying it's a joke on a subsection of Arch Linux user. 99% of whom feel merely installing Arch is their version of summiting the Mount Everest. They are also highly likely to rise their desktop and frequent the Unix porn community on Reddit. And you can see the disparity, right? And I think this is where we have like a problem. Like let's word it this way. I think this is where we have a huge problem. I'm gonna repeat it again. To me, it's a self-deprecating joke, which kind of like put me in the community of the Arch user and kind of shows that I like to waste time on my operating system. That's how I feel when I talk about it, because this is the truth. By definition, using Arch doesn't make you a pro of Linux, and especially now. Like if you use Arch Linux and you use it through using Arch install and you did nothing else, there is a high chance that your system is gonna break really soon. Okay, like I want to be honest with you. You might think I'm saying something stupid here, but Arch Linux requires a minimum of, I would say, like research and time and knowledge to go and tweak some part of your distro. So maybe you went through it, everything went well, but the truth is like you need to spend a little bit more time than the other distro. And what is really funny about this meme itself is like depending on who says it and depending on who listen to it, you can have a totally different meaning. Because as I mentioned earlier, you're gonna have like people who literally use this, I use Arch by the way, to prove to the others that they are on paper better than them. Why not? And the crowd will take it as a directed attack. But you have also people, I guess like me, which is using it like a community, like self-deprecating like type of joke, that will have the same kind of like welcome, like feedback on the other end of the spectrum, right? And so, man, like, it kind of like make me think really deep about it. Because even right now, when I'm saying I'm using Arch, some of you guys which are like watching this video could still be triggered. It's just insane. So we have this meme here, which kind of resumes the situation. This guy is trying to make a move on the other dude. Like trying to explain him how much he loves Arch, I guess. And the other one is like, I told him 1,000 times before. I don't want Arch Linux. I don't know why, dude. Like it makes me laugh really, really bad. I think this is one of those situations where I believe we never get out of it. But to kind of like put everybody at the same level, there is still truth about Arch Linux itself. And one of the truth is the fact that Arch Linux as a distro as itself really gives the steering wheel to the user. And it means what it means, right? You could be a really good driver with the steering wheel in your hand and be able to go through every type of problem without any issue because you know how to document yourself, you know how to make your research. Or you could be someone who has no clue of what he's doing with the steering wheel and just crash the car, right? And I think this is the kind of like paradox we are in right now, because Arch Linux is becoming so easier to install is that it kind of like removes the spirit itself of Arch Linux, which was, again, like letting the user learning how to install his own operating system and giving him the opportunity to make mistake also, right? And so now we have like this type of like in the middle user who want to really like prove to the world they are like strong enough to install like Arch install, but maybe are not really willing to go and read the Arch wiki, which is almost like impossible to avoid. So it's really, really interesting on this one. And on the other hand, you have like just Linux user, whether they use Arch or not, to be fair, who are like constantly like aggressed by this sense of community of the Arch user themselves. And yeah, it's a pretty interesting one. So that was the first truth, right? The first truth is that as an Arch Linux user, well, you have to do the thing on your own. But the other truth is that using Arch doesn't give you the power user god level that you think you have. And maybe you have it, okay? Like maybe you have it. I've been personally like using Arch for like 3 years straight. I'm repeating myself, but I still feel like I have so much to learn because it's a rolling edge distro. Everything is evolving all the time. You can't just sit down and say like I know everything, because it will be like false. Like it's just impossible. So, you know, Arch Linux for me really humbled myself, because I went from, you know, the Debian world where everything is super clean, everything is kind of like stable in a way that there is not a lot of update, everything kind of like follow a trend, which is like linear. When you go on Arch, it's kind of like a roller coaster, right? It's like, oh, we updated that, and you need to get up to date about what is really happening behind the scene, like change your configuration file and all this stuff. But this is what I like. But you have to think that if Arch will make you really like a god in Linux, don't you think that the god himself, like I'm using the word god, but you get it, like the creator, okay, of Linux himself, Linus Torvald, he would be using it, right? Right? No, it's not. He's using Fedora. So, yes, it doesn't work, right? You can see right away for all the people that believe that using Arch makes them like better or, you know, like stronger Linux user, is just straight false. I do believe that you could, and I actually made a video about it 6 months ago. You could use every distro for whatever usage you want. I do believe like Arch have significant value added in certain cases, not in all of them. Like, don't get me wrong, like it could be a real pain when there is an update, it's broken, you have to fix it because it's gonna happen. But you know, like the easiness of access to different package with the AUR, the always up-to-date type of feeling with the latest packages is really nice. Okay, it's really nice, and there is no other distro right now that provides that. But it doesn't make the end user a better user. Actually, to me, again, I'm gonna repeat myself, it makes the user more like a, you know, like a geek who is willing to spend more time fixing his own operating system. So this video is really like some type of video where I wanted to share my thoughts and show like some type of duality, right, within the community, the Arch user, by the way, and the other one, and kind of like put everything like flat. You know, if you are a non-Arch user, well, I just prove it. You don't need to feel inferior. You're good. Your distro is great. Your distro is great. I'm looking at you, Fedora user. You're good. You're good. Okay? Now, if you are using Arch and you are a big by the way type of guy, it doesn't make you a better user. You're just using Arch. You just know how to read a wiki. And you're just willing to lost, I will say it, a lot of time trying to find those little configuration files in the terminal. I'm one of them. And honestly, like, I don't feel bad about it. I don't feel like superior or inferior. So, you know, to all the users which are going to make a comment on this video, like, please tell me how you feel about that. Like, I'm really curious. And also, like, to all the users in the future which are going to say stuff like, bro, like, you are such an Arch elitist because you are making some tutorial on Arch and you are always saying you are using Arch. Well, I'm saying I'm using Arch because that's what I'm using in the tutorial. And I just want to inform you that maybe you won't be able to do that on your Debian distro or your Fedora distro. That's all. Like, it's just informative. But you take it negatively, this video will be for you too. Okay? There is no elitism there. This is not a way of passing a hidden message. I'm just using Arch, by the way. Guys, thank you very much for watching and see you in the next one. Bisous, bisous.